Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful. I'd like to welcome you, dear viewers, to another in our series, The 7 Habits of Success. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May Allah's peace and blessings be on each and every one of you. As you all know, we are looking at the characteristics of those people who are truly successful in this life. And we began this whole series by pointing out that true success in this life is success in what will give us success in the next life, because this life is not our goal. Those who believe in a world to come, then we know that the goal is that world, is paradise ultimately. So true success in this life is for one to have done in this life what will guarantee one, by God's grace, paradise in the next. This is where true success lies. Not in necessarily gathering around oneself material things, because these things we leave when we leave this life. We can't take them with us. They do nothing for us in the next life. So what are the issues? What are the principles? What are the characteristics which become the habits of those headed for paradise? This is what our series has been looking at. We looked at the first principle, and we spoke of it being knowledge, having a knowledge of reality, a knowledge of God, a knowledge of our relationship to God. The second was committing ourselves to that belief, not only having the knowledge, but turning that knowledge into faith by commitment, developing a love for God and His messenger. And we talked about how we could do that. And the third of the characteristics is trust, being able to put our complete trust in God. And we spoke about the promises Prophet Muhammad ﷺ made to different companions who put their trust in God. You know, as he asked whoever would promise or guarantee that he would never ask anyone for anything, such a person would be guaranteed paradise. And he also mentioned those who would go into paradise, some 70,000 people who would go into paradise without any reckoning. They would not be judged at all. And among them, there are those who place their trust in their Lord. Complete trust. So we spoke of then how we began to look at how does one develop trust, that full trust in Allah. And we began in our previous section in looking at the basic principle from which that trust is derived. It's knowledge of Allah. Just as knowledge in general of Allah is what will help put one in paradise, knowledge of Allah is also what helps develop in the individual the correct trust. And we spoke about it being knowing basically that Allah knows what's best for us. Therefore, whatever happens in our lives, it's tailored by Allah for our own benefit. Knowing that it is what Allah knows what's best, we trust His judgment in our lives. I mean, if we believe He knows what is best, because it's part of our knowledge of Him, when He knows what is best for us, it means then whatever situation we find ourselves in is what is best for us. And we need to now utilize that situation to build our faith in God. And just as a side point, before going on to the second point of knowledge that we should have about God, is that when we talk about putting our complete trust in Allah, in God, we're not talking about the type of trust where we don't utilize the things of this world which have to do with cause and effect chains to achieve certain ends. Meaning, we do not say, for example, I trust in God that if He wants for me to have children, He will find a wife for me. So I'll just sit at home, right? And I will have children. No, this is not tawakkul, or putting one's trust in God. This is tawakkul. Or one goes on a journey and doesn't take the necessary provisions, saying, I'm trusting in God, that God will provide for me. I head out on the desert, I don't take water with me, I don't. No, this is foolish. This is not tawakkul. This is not the trusting in God. This is a foolish turning one's affairs over without having taken the necessary steps. As was clarified by the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ on one occasion when he was sitting in the masjid with his companions, and a man came in, and as he was about to sit down with the Prophet ﷺ, he remembered he had left his camel outside and hadn't tied it up. So he asked the Prophet ﷺ, should I trust in Allah or should I tie up my camel? And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, tie up your camel and trust in Allah. So he told him to use the means that's available to us. We don't just leave it all to Allah. No, you tie up the camel. Of course, after tying the camel, there's no absolute surety that the camel may not get loose somehow, some way, and escape. I mean, that possibility exists. But if it happens after we have done our best. Then we leave the rest to Allah. So when we talk about trust in Allah, we should keep this in mind, that we're not talking about blind trust which does not come as a result of having done what is on one's part. We do what we have to do first, and then we leave the rest to Allah. We don't jump out of a plane without a parachute saying, well, God, you can save me. No, we take our parachutes. But we know when we jump, we still have to put our trust in God, because all the preparations we make will not guarantee that we will live through whatever day we live, whatever step we take, every time we get in a car, every time we go anywhere, even in our own homes. How many people die in their own homes? They slip in the bathroom, they hit their head, and they're dead. So, I mean, our trust is there in God, that we do whatever we can to protect ourselves from harmful things, and we then put our trust in God. So, carrying on from that point, knowledge of God, the second point that we should know, after knowing that Allah knows what's best for us, is that Allah is just. This is part of the knowledge of God that we should have. We know that Allah is just, that He will not oppress us, that whatever circumstance we find ourselves in, it is not something which is beyond our capacity to handle. You know, as Allah said in the Quran, وَلَا يَظْلِمُ رَبُّكَ أَحَدًا. This is in Surah Al-Kahf, verse 49. Your Lord will not oppress anyone. And Allah said in Surah Al-Baqarah also, وَمَن يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. Whoever puts their trust in Allah will find Him sufficient. He is sufficient for them, meaning that if they trust in Him, He will look after them. He is fair. And that's where they should put their trust. He does not burden anyone beyond their capacity. As Allah said, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. That He would not burden any soul more than it can bear. There's justice with Allah. Human beings may be unjust. They may deceive, they may cheat, they may lie, they may harm others with an evil intent. However, everything which Allah does in our lives is for good. It is for us to realize that, trust in Allah, knowing that He is just. He is not going to do anything unfair to us. And this is something that we need to teach our children. So we don't find the children in a situation where, as there was an image I remember seeing in the newspaper some time back, of a little girl in England. This is after they killed many, many cattle for fear of the spread of the hoof and mouth disease, which was, spreading all over England. So they were killing many, many cows. So here was this little girl with a picture. She had this poster or piece of paper written, there's a little circle on the paper. It said, a little arrow to it saying, my tears, right? And then she has a statement written on this. Oh God, why did you have to kill my cow? Her favorite cow, she had become very attached to one of the cows, was slaughtered. So she puts the blame back on God. God, why did you do this? You know, this is something unfair. She senses in this unfairness, you know, and this kind of lack of understanding can lead people into disbelief. Because if you sit and listen to many of those who are the well-known atheists, when they speak about why they became atheists, why they denied God, because they felt there is injustice. That if God's in control of all these things, why should this have happened? Why did I, when I was a young child, my favorite aunt, who was such a good person, did all these good things, etc., she had this terrible car accident and she died. Why? What's the reason? Why was her life taken? You know, as a child, he or she cannot find reason or rhyme in what has happened here. They just see somebody very good lose their life. So they blame God. And from blaming God, they deny God. Because if there was a God, this shouldn't happen. If God is fair, if he's just, etc., this shouldn't happen because there's injustice here. So it leads them to disbelief. Or others, you know, like one of the famous physicists, you know, who currently he moves around in a wheelchair. He's all crippled up and everything inside of this wheelchair. And if you listen to him speaking, you know, he's a brilliant mind. Physically, his body is ravaged with some spinal disease. This happened to him whilst he was still a young man in his late teens or early 20s, something like this. This disease started to affect him. So, you know, he looks back, he says, why? Why me? Why am I in this state? Why shouldn't I be healthy? He visits countries like India. You see so many people whose lives have nothing, really nothing to offer to civilization, but yet they're healthy. And here he is with so much to offer as he perceives it, and he is in this terrible physical shape. If there was a God, this shouldn't happen. Why should this happen to me? So it's people's inability to deal with this concept of justice, that whatever God does in this life, there is good behind it. In their inability, this can lead them to disbelief in God altogether. So it's a very, very important point to grasp and to understand that God is just. God is fair. Nothing happens to someone or anyone in this life without there being a good reason. Sometimes we're able to grasp the reason, sometimes we're not. But the bottom line is, if we are true believers, if we've understood God, then whether we're able to grasp the reason or not, we believe that it is for the better. So we trust in God. We believe he is just. So by believing in his justice, his fairness, then that gives us this sense of trust. Very essential. The third principle, as part of knowledge of God, or God's attributes, how God deals with his creatures, which helps us to understand trust in God, or to develop in ourselves trust in God, is knowledge that with every difficulty comes ease. As Allah said, "Inna ma'al usri yusra," in the 94th chapter of the Quran, known as Ash-Sharh, verse 6, Allah says this, and repeats it. Twice he says this. Indeed, with every difficulty comes ease. Indeed, with every difficulty comes ease. Something again that we need to know. Because this is linked also with the concept of fairness and justice. That when Allah puts something on us, he doesn't put it on without ease coming. That we will find a period of difficulty, but if that difficulty never let up, there was no let up in the difficulty, then it would be overburdening. It would be too much. We would not be able to handle it. So God does bring along with that difficulty ease. Ease which helps us to be able to cope. This is his promise. And we know it in our lives. We have experienced difficulties of the past, but are they still with us? At the time that the difficulty struck us, it seemed like it would never end. But now we look back, in retrospect, we look back, we realize that it was limited. It came for a while. It seemed virtually unbearable. However, after some time, we were able to handle it. It ended. It didn't continue. So, knowing that gives us the kind of patience, trust in God to be able to hang in there. We trust that whatever difficulty that comes to us, there will be a period of ease after it. Linked to the justice, linked to the concept that Allah knows what's best. Another way to develop trust in God is to read about the lives of the prophets and the righteous mentioned in the Quran and in the Sunnah, in the Seerah. We read about the prophets of the past, the trials that they went through, the difficulties they were faced with, how they patiently stayed there and stayed behind that message. And eventually, Allah gave them success or destroyed the evil people that refused to accept the message or whatever. But Allah was with them. Look at the Sahaba in their lives, how many examples of difficulties that they faced, but they trusted in Allah, how they put their trust in Him. So by reading about them, this gives us the idea, well, it is something within our grasp. It's not something which is just a theoretical thing, something which is, it sounds good on paper, sounds good when it is spoken about, but it's just theory. There's no reality to it. No, there is reality. The examples from the lives of the companions of the Prophet, may God's peace and blessing be upon him, are ample examples of how we can trust in God. And of course, righteous people of the past, who came after them, the scholars, the righteous individuals, who, many of them you can find, they went through different periods of difficulty in their lives, or they may have faced difficulty most of their lives. Whatever, the point remains that they trusted in God. You can see that trust in the realities of their lives, examples for us as guides. So we read their history, their biographies, the biographies of the prophets, to bring this concept of trust into reality, to make it more accessible to ourselves. With that, dear viewers, I'd like to thank you for being with us in this segment of our program, The 7 Habits of Success. We hope that you will continue to follow the segments of our program as we continue to look at the 3rd habit and on through the other 4 remaining habits. I bid you now farewell. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.